We are a nation of 30 caliber shooters and enthusiasts. Great 30 calibers, why they're so popular. That's what we're going to pontificate today on Gunfighter Life. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, cartridges, hunting, defense, all manner of gun and gun related topics the right way with biblical Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host. Bullet points for the bio in the show notes. I will just say first and foremost, I am a servant of God and a follower of Jesus Christ, who's blessed me to have many experiences in life related to firearms, hunting, defense, and I hope to pass those on to you. On that, I just got done with a roughly 10-hour with very few small breaks ruck in the wilderness. Went from behind the house to the nearest national forest road. I plotted it out on a map, and it took me about 10 hours to get to the nearest road that's in the national forest. And that barely scratches the surface of the 2 million acres of this particular national forest that joins up to another wilderness area. How was that germane to today's topic? Well, what did I take with me? Well, I took a scout rifle in .308, a 30 caliber. And while I'm still hopped up on adrenaline and testosterone from that march, I thought we would talk about this. It's my only weekday off from my other job, private security contracting. I got to hit it bright and early in the morning. And if not now, then when will I get content to you guys? That said, this comes from a poll that I put out on Patreon. You guys, the tribe that helps support the podcast. And I asked a very simple question. What is going to be your go-to hunting caliber for this season? 50% of the total vote was the .308. 25% was the .30-06. And 25% was the .30-30. We might talk about those different calibers, but all 30 calibers. Got me thinking, we're a nation of 30 caliber shooters. And why is that? Well, there's really nothing super special about the 30 cal. It's just what we kind of standardized on. The earliest one I can think of is the 3040 Krag. I'm not sure about this. I'm speculating here, but this is not gospel, right? We can speculate. The 3040 Krag. We went, meaning the U.S. government, with Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders in Cuba, and kind of got spanked, not as far as winning or losing. We won the battle, but we realized that the Spanish had a better cartridge. The 7mm Mauser, 7x57. We looked at that, and honestly, we kind of copied it. I believe we even got sued and lost because we copied it. But we wanted a very similar bottleneck Spitzer bullet cartridge or bottlenecked high-velocity cartridge. At first it wasn't Spitzer, but very shortly thereafter it became clear that Spitzer bullets were going to kind of be the thing. So the 3040 Krag kind of was a very short-lived cartridge. But from what I understand back in the day, if you have all your tooling and stuff to cut 30 caliber barrels, might as well keep the 30 cal. Not unique to America. A lot of other countries did this. But I assume we kept 30 caliber when we went to the 3003, which soon became the 30-06, because we're already cutting barrels in 30 caliber for the 3040 Krag. Why did we choose 30 caliber for the 3040 Krag? Well, we didn't at first. We went from the 4570 back when we were limited to black powder. Because black powder, you only can have so much pressure and so much velocity, so you might as well throw a big freaking bullet. But force equals mass times velocity squared, so velocity gives you quite a bit of energy and longer point blank range. A lot of things advantageous to a modern military. Why exactly the 30 cal when we went to 3040 Krag? Other than that, we don't do that stupid French Revolution metric system here. That's where that came from. The French Revolution was a horrible revolution, not like the American Revolution at all. It was not about individual rights. As far as I understand, it was about collective rights of the state, not the individual rights of a human being. Not a big fan of the French Revolution. Look at where France is today. kind of the laughing stock of the Western world. We don't mess with that stuff here, even if the whole rest of everybody else did. We were like, no, we're sticking with imperial. We like our yards, we like our miles, we like our pounds. Thank you very much. We like our calibers. Calibers are just fraction of an inch. We don't need that garbage millimeter stuff here. 30 caliber, .30 or .308 to be exact. Thank you very much. And a caliber, if you don't know, is just a fraction of an inch. That's why there's a point in front of it, a decimal point. 30 caliber is .308. .308, a little bit less than a third of an inch. 33 cal would be a third of an inch. So in other countries, we're going with 7 millimeter or 8 millimeter or 6.5 millimeter or 7.7 millimeter. We were going with 30 cal. And we've been going with it ever since. We still go with it. Now, our main service rifle today is a 22 caliber, also a great American standard, but that's not what we're talking about today. We still use heavily in the military 30 caliber, .308. We liked the performance of the 30-06 in World War I and World War II. We wanted to kind of keep that performance, but with advancements in propellant technology, we could get the same performance at what we had been getting in the old 30-06 with a shorter, lighter cartridge, which is the .308. And we still use that a ton today. We still use it in medium machine guns, 240 Golf, 240 Bravo, M24s, M21s, a whole arsenal of, medium caliber stuff in the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army. They use those. It's still a great machine gun round, even though it's not the primary infantry weapon round. 30 caliber is still heavily utilized in today's military. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, let's rewind here, a nation of 30 calibers. Why Winchester went with the 30 caliber, I assume it may have had something to do with the 30-40 Krag. But they went with it in the 30-30. We think of 30-30 as kind of old school, but at the time, a bottlenecked cartridge at those kind of velocities where you could, have a point-blank range out to about 150 yards, that was pretty high stepping, pretty high velocity back in 1890. I forget if it was in the mid to late 1890s, 94, 95, 96, 98. I don't remember the exact 1890s, and I'm not going to look it up. But for the 1890s, the 30-30 was a pretty good round. And guess what? It still is. If you're hunting deer inside 125, 150 yards, sure, you can kill deer and elk farther. I'm sure people have. That's really where it shines. And the vast majority, despite what gun magazines and ads would have you believe that you need a super high BC bullet and you need to throw a metal tube on the end of your gun that you're going to shell out $1,000 for, as some influencer told you to, most whitetail deer, which is the main big game animal hunted in North America, are taken inside 100 yards. The 30-30 does fine for that. And people still hunt with them. We saw that in the poll. Even out here out west, greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, still plenty of people hunt with the 30-30. Deer, elk, every year. Might get a bunch of Easterners and gullible people from California or whatever to believe that you need some crazy high whiz-bang cartridge. And there's always going to be guys that want to buy that stuff, and that's fine if that's how you wanted to spend your disposable income. But plenty of locals go out every year with a 30-30 and take deer and elk. Kind of wish on the hunter surveys that they would ask. They ask all kinds of questions on there. I wish they would ask, just so we'd have the data. What caliber did you take if you hunted in rifle season, were you successful? What caliber did you take your deer, elk, pronghorn, black bear with? And get even nerdy, what grain bullet. Anyway, that would be some good data, but 30-30 is still up there. It's still taking deer. And again, inside 125 yards, even out to 150, it's fine. It's a fine cartridge. And one of the reasons it's still so popular is tradition. A lot of people get into hunting for tradition. A lot of people get into hunting because their dad did it or their grandpa did it. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And a lot of people's dads and grandpas hunted with a Winchester Model 1894 or a Winchester, or as I was, a Marlin 336 or similar. A lot of people still hunt with those, or they know that their dad or grandpa hunted with those and they want one, or they just heard about them and they want one and they want to hunt with them. So the 30-30 is still going strong, It's, by today's standards, moderate velocity. At the time, it was a high velocity cartridge. Today, it's a moderate velocity cartridge, but it's still modern. As far as a bottleneck cartridge goes, you're kind of limited in it can't be a Spitzer bullet if you're shooting it in a lever action with a tube magazine. If you hand load it for a bolt action, and yeah, there were bolt actions made in it, or a single shot or something, you can use Spitzer bullets and crank up the velocity a bit, but most people aren't doing that, and it's still a fine cartridge again. So for all those reasons, 3030 is still going strong. Now, what I would consider the king of North American game cartridges, the 30-06, well over 100 years old. Obviously adopted by the military in 1906. There was a short iteration of the 1903 or the 3003, which it stayed the 1903 Springfield, but the cartridge was slightly updated, sleeker bullet, pointed bullet. Went from I believe the 220 grain to 147 or 150 grain 3006 bullet. They still kept that 1 in 10 twist though for the heavier bullets, which is great. It's one of the things that has made the 30-06 so versatile over the years, is that Americans, for some reason, a lot of companies love the 1 in 12 twist. For a long time, that was a standard in 308. Not so much anymore, but that's kind of limiting. The 30-06, since it originally had a 220 grain bullet, it'll still stabilize a 220 grain round nose bullet, of which I have many. It's a great thumper for, up close and personal, either bear defense or brush hunting. It's got pretty good ballistics. Not like max point blank range, not if you're trying to go long distance, but if you're talking about hunting in the brush or hunting inside 200 yards, that 220 grain is awesome. And since they spun it for that heavy bullet with a 1 in 10 twist, it gives you a vast array of different bullets, all the way down to 110 grain, maybe even lighter, but commonly loaded 110 grain to 220 grains. That is versatility. That is one of the reasons that the 30-06 is still one of the best choices for all around North American game. I'm not going to get into whether it's the best, but it's one of the best. Even if you took the tradition out of it, even if you took the 2 world wars out of it, it's still a phenomenally versatile, powerful cartridge. And it's about the upper limit, which I think is one of the reasons the military stuck with it and chose it, is that's about as much as the average man can shoot and not really get beat up in recoil, and hence the marksmanship ability of said infantrymen, servicemen go down. Yeah, I mean, you can shoot a 300 Win Mag a couple of times if you want, but you're probably not doing a course of fire with a 300 Win Mag. You're probably not running, boxes and boxes of ammo through it, doing a course of fire, doing a qualification like one would do with a 30-06. That's about the upper limit in a reasonably weighted rifle. And it's still a good choice. And I think, a lot of the cartridges that the military adopts do really well on the civilian side too. Right? The 30-06, the 223, the 9mm, the 45 ACP, they're all military cartridges. The 30-06 is not just that, though. Yeah, it has the 2 World Wars thing. It has that many of our forefathers fought World War I, Korea, World War II with it. Even some use up into Vietnam. But it's just a really good cartridge. It's really well balanced. Again, nothing special about the 30 cal. The 7 Mauser, of which we copied, that's a good cartridge too. The 8 Mauser is still a good cartridge. It's good as well. But America is a nation of 30 cals, per the title for today. We are a nation of 30 cals. It's a good balance. And the common loadings in the 30-06, and we'll get to the 308, the 150 grain, 168, 175, 180 grains. Those are the most common. And man, they'll do anything in North America. You can go heavier if you want, but for a deer size game, 150 grain, 30-06, it's great. Come back to the 30-06 in a bit, but jumping over, just as the military discovered with advancements in powder, you can get that original kind of velocity, 150 at 2750 or 2800 feet a second to keep good round numbers. You can get that with the 308. So anything you really could have done with an old school 30-06, you can do with a modern 308. Even better because you have advancements in bullet technology. And the 308, now we call it a short action. because the 308's become so popular, it's kind of the standard of which a bunch of other calibers are measured against, or direct descendants of children, grandchildren of the 308, like a 260. A child of the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor, a child of a child, and you could say that the 308 is a child of the 30-06. So what is that, a great grandbaby, the 6.5 Creedmoor, and many other Wildcats. Actually, could go 30-06, 308, 30 Thompson Center, which is the parent case of the 6.5 Creedmoor, which has a bunch of its own children, the latest one being a 25 Creedmoor. You could trace that lineage all the way back, and many others on that family tree, to the 30-06. Where was I? For deer size game, and again, we're primarily a nation of deer hunters, 150 grain. And again, you can choose different bullet weights depending on what your rifle likes or what you want to do or what kind of hunter you are, or you want a super slick high BC bullet. But 150 grain bullet out of a 308 30-06 is a phenomenal choice, even with just what I would call fairly rudimentary bullet technology. Just a cup and core bullet. And the 308 does pretty well into the 168 grain. It does okay, a little bit heavier than that, but when you start getting into the 180s and higher, going back to the 30-06, going back to the parent kind of makes sense. You just get that little bit better powder capacity for heavier bullets, and especially if you're going to go above 180. 180 you can get by with a 308. You're going to do a little bit better with a 30-06, but anything heavier, 200, 220 grain, you're probably going to want to go back to the 30-06. The 308 is probably the best, in my opinion, all-around rifle cartridge, period. Because it's a great cartridge for defense. It's a great cartridge for hunting. It's a great all-around cartridge. If I could only own one rifle chambering, hopefully not just one rifle, but if you said I could only have one caliber of center fire rifle, as much as I like ARs and I like to compete with ARs, I would pick the 30 cal. I'd pick a 308. I could have my Scar 17. I could have my Ruger Scout rifle, which I was out scouting with today. Sig Cross. It's a great versatile round. It's as much as the 30-06 is a better all-around hunting cartridge, I think, in North America, the 308 is the better all-around cartridge today, period, because there are way more defensive rifles chambered in it, way more semi-autos. Anything from the old school M14 copy, the M1A, which is not a bad rifle other than it's a beast and it's heavy, but one of my first competition rifles. It's a good rifle, just heavy. To the Scar, to all the AR-10s that are around, to the Ruger SFAR, a ton of really good defensive, offensive, fighting type rifles in 308. Not really getting that in a 30-06, right? Not too many people are running around with BARs. So you kind of lose that. If you want a versatile all-around tactical / hunting / kind of do everything okay, the 308 is it. And it's kind of the dominant, at least medium bore to big bore center fire cartridge in America today, period. And around the world. Tons of shooters around the world like 308. Take that metric system. Now, of course, there are many other 30 cals. There are even 30 cals that aren't .308. Formerly Great Britain, right? They have the 303. A little bit different diameter. The Russians, 7.62 by 54, but it's the same 30 cal. It's still a 30 cal because, right, there's some variance in there. But I forget if there's this 311 or 312 for the actual diameter. They measure stuff different. The Russians, just going off on a rabbit hole, I think before they went all commie on us, they have one of the best units of measurement ever, the Martian, which was basically the length of a man's step. You talk about a good common sense way to measure stuff for a military man, right? We have pace counts for a reason. Metric all you want, but a man's pace The average man's pace is a phenomenal way to measure distance. Wish they'd have kept that. Wish we would have adopted it. Wouldn't have to do conversions. Like I know for me, 33 paces is 50 yards. And I got to go through all that math. Why not just use Martians? It'd be a great measurement. Anyway, there are many other .30 calibers around the world. We're talking about our nation and our .30 caliber .308. Of course, there are a ton of mag. There are so many. Right? If I just open up my Spear reloading manual, this is not even all. This is just some of the common ones. .30 carbine, 30-30, 300 Savage, 307 Winchester, 308 Winchester, 30-40 Krag, 30-06 Springfield, 300 Remington Short Action Ultra Magnum, 300 Winchester Short Magnum, 300 H&H, 308 Norma Mag, 300 Winchester Mag, 300 Weatherby Mag, 300 Remington Ultra Mag, 3378 Weatherby Magnum. That's just a few of .308 30 cal rounds. We love them here in America. Are they the only game in town? No. There are plenty of other really good rounds. 280 Ackley improved, 7mm 08, 243 Winchester. There's a ton of good calibers. 270, right? But if you look at the amount dominated on the market by .30 calibers, just those ones we talked about, mainly the 30-30, the 30-06, and the 308, it's a huge portion of the market. We are a nation of .30 cal people, and I think we will continue to be so. We have embraced a little bit more the metric caliber, or the metric measurements, the millimeters, 7 Rem Mag, right, 6.5 Creedmoor. But honestly, I think it's going to be a long time before any caliber or millimeter overtakes 30 in America. With that, guys, just a reminder, like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. I appreciate you, appreciate all that you do. This was from a proverb I was reading this morning. Do not overwork to be rich. Because of your own understanding, cease. Work-life balance is the way we put it today. That's important. Yeah, you should work as a man. You should provide for yourself, for your family. But don't spend your whole life chasing after $1 and then die before you can enjoy it. Balance that out. And for everything, there's a season. There's a time to save. There's a time to spend. But what I'm saying here is use common sense. There's plenty of proverbs about hard work. But this one, I think myself and a lot of other men have a tendency to overwork. So I'm going to read it again. Do not overwork to be rich. Because of your own understanding, cease. Thanks, men, and have a blessed day.